Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I'll be sharing my favorite board games of 2021. And we'll get stuck in right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, today I'm going to be sharing 10 of my favorite board games from 2021. But before we dive in, a few things I do want to mention. First of all, some of these games did not come out in 2021. Some of them came out earlier, 2020. I think one of them may have been 2019, but 2021 was the first time I got to experience these games. So that's why they are my favorites of the year. Favorites is a key word as well. This is not a best of 2021. There's a multitude of reasons behind why it's not. Number one, I didn't get to play tons of board games this past year because of COVID. So actually getting reviews done for board games was a pretty tough slog for us this year because we always make sure that we play a game 3 times before it gets a review. And most of the time we don't just sit down and play the same game 3 times over and over. It's usually we get together 3 separate times and one of the games happens to be on the lineup of what we're going to play so we can get the review. That was very difficult to do this year. It's also not a best of list because I didn't see hardly any board games that came out this year. So it'd be pretty disingenuous for me to be like, oh, these are the best of 2021 when I got to check out like 40 board games. So also, lastly, should point out that all of these games were provided by the fine publishers, and that was it. So at no point in time did I or anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang receive any other sort of compensation from these publishers for me to share my coverage with you. These days, it is important that you know that. All right, that said, let's kick off. So the first role-playing game that I tackled in my favorite role-playing games of 2021, which, if you haven't seen that, check that video out when you're done watching this one. So the first was Dune, Adventures in the Imperium from Modiphius Entertainment. My first favorite game of 2021 is Dune Imperium from Dire Wolf Digital. So how about that? 2 Dune games in my favorites. So out of my favorite 20 games, Dune has something to do with 2 of them. That's kind of unusual. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip on over to the other camera. When I did the looks at my favorite RPGs, I kind of flipped through the books a little bit. I'm not going to be cracking open all these boxes and pulling stuff out because we don't want this video to be 2 hours long. So what I'm going to do, this is a bit of stream of consciousness. This is not scripted or anything like that. If you follow the Gaming Gang, you watch any of the videos, you know that I don't script stuff. It's just, let's have a chat. Dune Imperium is a deck building game, and most people are familiar with Dire Wolf Digital, at least as far as board gaming, by way of Clank, a deck building adventure, and its sequels and its expansions and things like that. And that is a fantastic deck building game. So is Dune Imperium. There's a lot going on here. So you're going to take on the leadership of a house. So like House Atreides or House Harkonnen. And everyone's vying for control of the desert planet Arrakis. Just like in the book, just like in the film. And I do want to point out the artwork is inspired by the film, but it is not just scanned and, digitized. And it's certainly not just stock images, stills from the movie, which I do definitely appreciate that. But as you're playing, you really do kind of feel like you're building up your resources. You're kind of manipulating things behind the scenes, which of course political machinations play a huge role in the Dune novels and film, and does in this as well. Now, the only thing that I kind of had a knock on this when I did my review for it was I felt that the game board was kind of bland. And some people took umbrage to that. And I never said that it affected the gameplay, which is fantastic in this. I just said, I would have liked to have seen a little more visual pop on the game board. Something else that I think is pretty cool with this is you have multiple houses, and the houses have kind of a difficulty rating. So if you've got, say, new players who have not played Dune Imperium, or maybe it's a second time playing, and you've got other players who have played this quite a bit, you can give some of the easier houses to the newbies, while the more difficult houses go to the more experienced players. I like that as well. Game plays about 90 minutes to 2 hours. I don't think once we learned how to play, we didn't clock in at 2 hours. It was closer to about 90 minutes. Really, really enjoyed this. Definitely take a peek at Dune Imperium. It is a tie-in game that is not garbage. So, you know what I'm talking about. Some of these licensed games are not very good. That is certainly not the case with Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium is excellent. All right. Now, I happen to have done a Kickstarter preview for a company that I was not familiar with until I did the Kickstarter preview. And that is Green Feet Games. And of course, if you follow the Gaming Gang, I cover war games. Once again, 2021 was not a good year for me doing reviews of war games just because of the lack of opponents being able to get together. But I love historical games as well. And Unforgiven, the Lincoln assassination trial, is an excellent, excellent two-player game. Now, this is the retail edition here because it is available. It is out. It did successfully kickstart. And this is fantastic. So essentially what's going on is you are either going to be the prosecution in the trial of Mary Surratt as a conspirator to assassinate Abraham Lincoln, or you are defending her. And there is an awesome kind of back and forth, just kind of like seesaw to the proceedings, as well as you're looking to gain evidence. You're looking to sway the military jurors, because keep in mind, this was a military tribunal. This was not a civil trial, which actually changed how military tribunals actually were handled after this trial. A lot of people out there, a lot of differing opinion on if Mary Surratt was just, happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time because she owned the boarding house that all the planning took place in, and others feel that, you know what, she was a willing participant. This is such a cool game. This is such a cool game. And it plays out, once you know how to play the game, a little more than an hour. A little bit more than an hour. There are some ways to actually, win, almost like automatic wins. So you don't necessarily have to play through all 3 rounds of gathering evidence and things like that. And I got to say, the production quality of this, even when I did the Kickstarter preview, was excellent. Really, really well done. If you're looking for a unique 2-player game and you really like history, in fact, you don't even have to like history that much. Definitely take a look at Unforgiven, the Lincoln assassination trial from Green Feet Games. So let's move on to a game that I gotta be honest, I'm not sure if it came out in 2021 or if it came out earlier than 2021. We have played a ton of this game, and that game is Funfair from Good Games Publishing. This is a game that has to stay in my car. There are a small number of games that remain in my car at all times. Carcassonne is one. Funfair is now another. Because everybody who has played Funfair with me absolutely loves it. If you are not familiar with Funfair, it's kind of a follow-up to an earlier game from Good Games Publishing, and that is Unfair. So the premise of this game is you're looking to build the best theme park in town. In Unfair, you were doing the same, but you could actually sabotage the other players. There were cards that you could play that you could essentially, trash their park. So there was a lot of take that to Unfair. Funfair, there is not. Essentially, there's not a ton of player interaction. There is some, especially based on some of the events that take place. But you're never actually intentionally screwing with somebody else's park. So if you don't like a lot of gotcha or take that in your games, then you'll definitely dig Funfair. So what you're basically doing is you're creating an amusement park, and you've got a maximum of 5 rides. So with those 5 attractions, they don't necessarily have to be rides, but with those 5 attractions, you're going to add upgrades to them, features to them. The more that you have of those, the more victory points each of those rides is going to be worth. You hire employees who might provide you extra cash every turn. They might provide you extra victory points at the end of the game. They may give you special bonuses during play as well. And then you also have these blueprint cards, which are kind of objective cards that you voluntarily take on that can earn you massive amounts of victory points. But the catch is, if you can't complete that objective, if you don't complete that blueprint, they cost you 10 victory points, which is a good chunk of change in this game. Really, really enjoy Funfair. My mom, who is almost 80, loves it. My sister-in-law, Dawn, who really doesn't play board games at all, really got a kick out of it. My best friend, Elliot Miller, I want to say, I think he went and bought this after we had played it a few times. It is that good. It is that fun. I like the art style. The art style is very nicely done. The component quality is excellent as well. So if you are looking for a family game, a family-friendly game that's got a bit of meat on its bones, definitely take a peek at Funfair from Good Games Publishing. If you happen to follow the Gaming Gang, then you know we cover war games at a pretty good clip. And this was just not a great war game year for me. We did get some games played to do some reviews for. And one game that I really liked, and kind of came out of nowhere, was Crusader Kings from Worthington Publishing. It's the War for the Holy Land. So yes, it is the Crusades. And let's flip on over to the other camera. One of the things that's pretty wild about this game is based on the number of players will determine what game board you're using and what forces you're using. So there is some area control involved in this, and a card-driven aspect, but it is not a very heavy rule system. In fact, Worthington's pretty well known for having relatively rules-light war games compared to other publishers out there. So their games tend to be very easy for newcomers to jump into. Now, I got to be honest, some of the Worthington games are, in my opinion, maybe a little too light. Crusader Kingdoms is not. I really thought Crusader Kingdoms is very, very cool. It's area control. It is card-driven as well. It's got cool medieval artwork on all the cards as well. The component quality is very nice. The one knock that I tend to have with just about every Worthington Publishing war game is their price point. And the price point from Worthington Publishing is high, in my opinion. So what I always say, and usually I try to, convince people to go to a publisher, but a few dollar difference might mean the difference between purchasing a game and not purchasing a game. I always tell folks, check out the online retailers for the Worthington Publishing titles, because the games are really good. And I get it. It's a niche market. And I say it all the time. Wargaming is a niche market of a niche genre, because board gaming, even though a lot of people think, oh my gosh, look how popular it is still a niche hobby. So if you want to save a few dollars on the Worthington Publishing titles, definitely check out some online retailers. This is solitaire as well, and it plays up to 4 players. And once again, really enjoy this, and it plays in about an hour. So it doesn't wear out its welcome. And I got to say, Crusader Kingdoms is one of my favorite war games that I had an opportunity to play this year. Pretty sweet. So I had an opportunity to do a Kickstarter preview for a few different games over the years from Daily Magic Games. And I have enjoyed everything that I've played from Daily Magic. I have not played everything in their Valeria lineup of games, although the new edition of Card Kingdoms of Valeria just arrived about 2 weeks ago. So a review of that is on the horizon. But one of the games that I did a Kickstarter preview for was Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria. And this is just a fun game. And it's got some surprising meat on its bones. There is strategy involved in it that isn't readily apparent when you first begin playing. So usually in the Valeria games, you're playing Heroes of Valeria, and you're somehow trying to stop the evil forces invading the land. In Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria, things have been flipped. You're actually the baddies. So each of the players is going to take on the leadership of a faction, and you're all vying to be the big boss. You're vying to be the big general who's going to lead the invasion army into Valeria. So take a look at the back here. There's a lot of various different mechanics going on in Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria. None of them are revolutionary. None of them are like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this before. But all together, they tie together so nicely and create a really, really fun game. So there's worker placement involved with this. There's kind of set collecting as well. We've got, everybody's going to have like an objective board that everybody's is different. So completing different things are going to give them bonuses of victory points or maybe magic points or allies that you can add as well. So what's going to happen is you got your main board, and each of the players are going to have their kind of like their warlord that they can assign to one of 5 areas. And each of those areas is going to provide a benefit for that player. Maybe it's giving you magic points. Maybe you need to get magic points. Maybe it'll allow you to recruit an additional ally to your forces. You have to complete missions. So we've got different missions that you can pick up. And none of the rules are difficult. This is a very easy game to jump into and learn how to play. It takes a few playthroughs to start to see some of the hidden strategies involved. But this also is a good game if you enjoy kind of worker placement with and like, playing as monsters and things like that in a game where you're not going to mess with the other players. There is really no take that involved. Essentially, you are kind of playing as your forces, doing your thing. You really don't have a whole lot of impact on the other players. And I know there are a lot of players out there who don't want gotcha in their board games. This is certainly something that's going to be perfect for them. But this is just such a fun fantasy game. And the artwork is great. Everything about this is just really, really well done. As I mentioned before, I have yet to play any game from Daily Magic Games that I have not really, really enjoyed. So that is Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria. Osprey Games actually has 2 titles on my favorites list. Amazingly enough, right? So the first is Undaunted North America, which is the second game in their Undaunted lineup. I think this came out, I think this is a 2020 release. I don't think it was a 2021. I think it came out right at the end of 2020. I got to be honest, I was a little bit late to the party on Undaunted, but of course the fine folks over at Osprey Games has provided me Normandy, which is the first game, North Africa, which is the second, and then there's an expansion that just recently came out, which is called Reinforcements. So Undaunted is a deck building game, essentially. And your deck are your soldiers. And as you lose soldiers, those cards come out of your deck. So you have to build up your forces. And then as the game progresses, you're going to lose soldiers out of your deck. Undaunted kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of people. And they were very, very pleasantly surprised how good it was. Or good it is, I should say. North Africa builds on that. North Africa provides British forces and Italian forces, whereas Normandy was American and German. We also get some new terrain types because we have terrain tiles in here. We also get vehicles. So we get Jeeps and machine gun trucks and medium tanks to utilize as well. And we get a campaign of various different scenarios for us to play. Really, really enjoy Undaunted North Africa. And the Reinforcements expansion, which is a much bigger box than this, includes more units, more rules. So we have solitaire rules in that. We have up to 4 players in that because the first 2 Undaunted releases are for 2 players. We get tanks for the Americans and Germans. We get just a lot more of everything. And I have not had an opportunity to bust out those new units yet, but I did an unboxing video for Reinforcements. Undaunted North Africa builds on what worked for Undaunted, and I have enjoyed this a lot. My nephew Cameron really enjoys Undaunted as well. All right, I'm kind of shifting things all over the place here. Let's talk a little bit about a light family game that I had an opportunity to check out for the first time in 2021, and that is Dragonrealm from Gamewright Games. This is a very light introductory kind of gateway game, and we've had a lot of fun with Dragonrealm. And for one, the artwork is really, really nicely done. Essentially what's happening is each of the players are an adventurer, and the adventurers are trying to visit these different locations and score victory points by completing different types of objectives, which are essentially just done by playing cards and rolling dice. And it's just really fun. We've got like magic items that you can acquire, and the artwork style is very light. And we have just had a whole lot of fun with Dragonrealm. So essentially what you're doing is you're going to have a variety of different locations available to you, and you need to place one of your adventurer meeples in a location spot in order for you to attempt to overcome an objective to score victory points. And whoever has the most adventures at a location are going to be scoring the most victory points. It's all dependent on how many adventurers you've got. A game plays very quickly, plays in about a half hour, plays up to 4 players. It's 2 to 4 players as well. Very small price point to get on board with Dragonrealm. This is one of those sorts of games that is really nice to introduce some of your friends and family who may not play board games, but who enjoy, fantasy. They like Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time. Well, maybe Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones is probably a bit more mature than, say, the core audience for Dragonrealm. But we've had a good time with it, really enjoyed it. And I think this is the one that came out like 2019. But 2021 was the first time I had an opportunity to check out Dragonrealm from Gamewright Games. So as I mentioned, there are 2 games in my favorites from Osprey Games. And the second is Imperium Classics, which there is also Imperium Legends. And essentially, this is a deck building game. Yes, I'm a fan of deck building games. I really am. And this one is all historical civilizations. I know with Legends, there's additional historical civilizations, and there's some fantastical civilizations as well, such as like the Atlanteans. And what's going on is each of the players are going to have their own civilization deck. So there are going to be cards that are going to be available to add into their empire, and they have to earn them. They don't just get these cards right off the bat. So there's a ramping up to your empire as well. There's also a marketplace with cards that are available for everybody to add to their decks as well. There's a bit of a tableau building aspect to this as well, a bit of an engine building aspect, a little bit of resource management as well. I love the fact that each of these historical civilizations play a little bit differently. So they'll kind of aim towards different ways or different approaches to playing well as those civilizations. Some of the civilizations are very combat focused. Others are more mercantilism focused. So others are kind of focused on just expanding and building upon civilization and discovering new advancements. Really, really dig this game. It is a little complex. It's one of the more complex deck building games out there, in my opinion, but do not let that scare you off of this game, because we have had a great time with it. Elliot's son, Brian, really, really digs this as well. In fact, I think he's picked it up. I think he's picked up both Imperium titles since we had an opportunity to play it a few times with him. So that is Imperium Classics from Osprey Games. I had an opportunity to sit down and do an interview with the fine folks over at Funko Games when I went to Gen Con. And Funko Games has come a long, long way in the, 3 years since they started? They started out there just doing their Funkoverse, little mini pops, board games, and now they've got hundreds of games in their catalog. They picked up a bunch of IPs. And of course, they've got a lot of different games that are based on other licenses like The Goonies, Rocketeer, Fast and Furious. Well, one game that kind of flew out of nowhere, pun intended, is Pan Am. And I was able to receive this over at the Gen Con and got to play it. Played it a few times with Elliot. Got my brother to play, who's not a big gamer, but he works in the airline industry. And this is another game where everybody really digs playing Pan Am. And let's take a look at the back, because interestingly enough, you are not competing with Pan Am. What you're trying to do, you're competing with the other players. So each of you is essentially the operator of an airline, a small airline. And this kind of runs through the history of the golden age of air travel. So like the 30s through the 1960s. And there are cards in the game that actually kind of track the time. So they're like events. And those are based on historical events as well as historical themes during that period. And that's how we actually count down the number of rounds that we've got. So you've got 7. And what's going on is each of the players are trying to establish air routes to sell off the Pan Am so that they can buy Pan Am stock. And whoever's got the most stock at the end of the game is the winner. So it's kind of funny because when we first started playing, it was kind of tricky. My brother, it wasn't clicking that he's not trying to compete with Pan Am, that he's trying to establish like air routes to sell off the Pan Am. And Pan Am can be kind of fickle because they're controlled by a die. So there might be rounds that they don't buy any air routes. And that is really your main way of generating income. So you also have different cards. And what you're going to do is to establish these air routes, you need an airport in connecting cities. Depending on what aircraft you've got available to you is the distance that can be traveled between those two cities. And as the game progresses, we have newer, more advanced technology release. So we get into jumbo jets late in the game. So with the decks of cards, you're going to have locations. And if you have a location card for somewhere that you've put an airport, then you can establish landing rights in that city. You don't have to have that specific card. There are other ways for you to establish landing rights in a city. They become kind of more costly card-wise. If, for an example, if you have 2 cards of the same region, you can use those to establish a landing rights in that location. And if you don't, you have to discard 2 cards of a matching region that's not the region to establish landing rights. So there's some little tricky aspects that the players have to learn and remember. But once they know, the game's super easy to play. The game will zip along. One of the aspects that was a little tricky was establishing airports and landing rights. They are 2 different things. So you can put an airport anywhere as long as you have placed your engineer in the section to perform that action. So the board is broken up into different areas. You have engineers that you're going to place. It's a worker placement aspect in order to perform an action. And one of them is build an airport. So you pay for the airport, you establish the airport, but you don't have landing rights in that city. So you need landing rights and an airport in 2 connecting cities to establish a route, which is another action that you take. And then you gain some money, and you're hoping to be able to sell that route later on to Pan Am in order to get money to buy Pan Am stock. Game sounds way more complex than it is. We've had such a good time with this. We've really enjoyed Pan Am. And as far as I understand, this kind of became a sleeper hit for Funko Games. And I can easily see why. So let's move along to my final game. And this game is from a company that's new, a new historical board game company. And they are Fort Circle Games. And it is The Shores of Tripoli. So it's the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps versus the Barbary Pirates. So this is taking place in the very, very early 19th century when U.S. ships were being attacked and boarded by the Barbary Pirates. So this is a 2-player game, and it is a card-driven game. But this is a very easy game to introduce new players to wargaming, and it doesn't look like your traditional war game. This is not a hex and counter sort of game. It is very lightweight, but there's also meat to the game as well. So what you're trying to do is if you're the Barbary Pirates, you're just trying to hold out against the American forces. You don't want them taking over the ports that you utilize. And if you're the Americans, then what you're trying to do is you're trying to catch the Barbary Pirates as they're going about their business, as well as take over the various ports that they use. Game plays in about an hour at most. Sometime once you get the hang of the game, I'd say maybe half hour, 45 minutes. You can knock it out depending on the skill level of each of the players. But really, really nicely done. Component quality is excellent as well. And it is actually an episode of American history that a lot of people probably don't know anything about. So very, very interesting topic for Fort Circle Games to take on. So most definitely check out The Shores of Tripoli if you're looking for a gateway war game to bring non-war gamers into the hobby. So there are my 10 favorite board games of 2021. Once again, it's not a best of list. It's just my favorites. There are a lot of other games that I really enjoyed as well throughout this past year. They just weren't necessarily my favorites. Okay, so we are actually hours away as I record this from New Year's Day. It is New Year's Eve. So we're going to look forward to some new exciting games for 2022 on the horizon as well. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, ding that bell. It'll not only inform you when I upload videos such as this, it'll also tell you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central right here on YouTube. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you so much for watching. Happy New Year to everyone out there. And here's hoping each and every one of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang. See you next year. Oh, hey, you're still here. Well, if that's the case, by all means, subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel by clicking right here. Check out the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch, or find out what YouTube recommends you check out from the channel. And of course, once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thanks for watching.